Everybody knows that there are massive benefits in having a highly diverse workforce. There's more than enough research showing that having diverse teams increases performance, productivity, profitability, and innovation. But having a diverse set of people and managing them to be a single cohesive unit are two very different things. And as a millennial, managing generations older and younger than you at the same time is a whole different ballgame. And that's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. Hello, everybody. My name is Lakshan, and I'm your host for this episode.
And I am Goldie, and this is episode 27 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast.
This episode is inspired by a LinkedIn post from a few weeks ago, written by this HR firm's founder who happens to be a millennial. I'm going to read it out verbatim. Being a millennial boss is really hard. You have a boomer or an older millennial boss who wants you to torture your team, make people work late hours, ask people to come to the office daily, and wear sophisticated clothes. You also had new aged millennials and Gen Z reporting to you who want flexibility, work life balance, work from home, and wear trendy and cool clothes. Funny thing is, in the process of keeping a good balance, you often end up disappointing both parties. This post went viral, and honestly, I can see why. He described exactly what it's like to be a millennial leader today. You're caught up between two very different ideologies on what work is and how things should be. And you are there trying to bridge this gap, keep everyone happy, and still somehow get all this work done without burning out. Doesn't it sound exhausting, Goldie?
It does, and I'm just glad that the Gen X were not mentioned, so we take no responsibility here. Pun intended.
I presume when you were speaking about older millennial bosses, he meant Gen X. Probably he didn't have the right terminology. That's what came up for me because I find it odd that maybe he happened to skip the generation, but I think the terminology wasn't a part of his vocabulary.
Perhaps, because it's very difficult to skip out a pretty key generation in today's leadership teams. So I gently put that in.
Yeah. And again, speaking of this viral post or things going viral, you know what would help our podcast go viral? Leaving a like or a 5-star rating on this episode and sharing it with all your friends. Oh, and while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to us if you're watching on YouTube and follow us if you're listening to us on Spotify or any other audio platform. In today's episode, we're going to break down the struggles of millennial leaders and how they can deal with it. We're going to be doing that by sectioning this episode into two segments. The first one being the major struggles and why they exist, and the second one being how millennial leaders can adapt and thrive moving forward. So let's start off with the very first segment of this episode, which is on what the current reality is like, what are the struggles today, and what's the reason that they exist. Now, if you're a millennial leader, your career has been shaped by a very specific work culture. You were raised to hustle, climb the corporate ladder, and prove your worth while navigating both this rigid office culture and the digital work revolution. Now, all of this was fine when you were individuals who were part of a team. But now you're likely the ones leading these teams where boomers expect structure, they want clear rules, traditional meetings, and long term loyalty, whereas Gen Z expects flexibility. They want autonomy, quick feedback, and career growth measured in months, not years. In fact, one of the comments on this viral post was of a millennial talking about how their job is basically to act as a translator between these two generations, because of which it almost feels like we're babysitting two very different children. So there are three major struggles that millennial leaders face while managing these two generations today. The first one is work ethic and expectations. Now, the way that boomers typically go about viewing this aspect of their professional lives is if you work hard and stay loyal, you'll be rewarded. And the way that Gen Z go about viewing this is If I don't see purpose and flexibility, I'm out. We've covered this in previous episodes how Gen Z cares a lot more about alignment in values when it comes to their professional lives. There's also a Deloitte survey which says that close to 50% of Gen Z are happy to quit a job that does not align with their values. And of course, the contrasting end is boomers who prioritize stability over passion and alignment of values. Now, boomers view Gen Z as lazy for not working long hours and as slacking off for wanting to work remotely. Whereas Gen Z view boomers as toxic for expecting them to compromise on these things that are important for them. That's the first major struggle. The second one is with respect to communication styles. Now, the way that boomers typically go about communicating would be through emails, formal language, and scheduled meetings. The way that Gen Z go about operating would be through Slack, voice notes, and just send me the summary. I had read about this millennial manager who said that his Gen Z intern quit over Slack without even scheduling a meeting. Just, hey, I'm leaving, thanks for everything. Done, that's it. Meanwhile, his boomer senior manager was just absolutely horrified, taken aback, saying, that's not how you resign. And well, you guessed it, the person who had to smooth this situation over was a millennial. And then there's the third major struggle in the workplace, which is with respect to feedback and recognition. Now, the way that boomers go about viewing feedback or recognition is no news is good news. But with Gen Z, it's can you tell me I'm doing a great job, like right now? And there's data to back this up. There's a study conducted by Gallup, which reveals that younger employees are a lot more likely to ask and desire frequent recognition compared to older employees. Specifically, Gen Z employees and younger millennials, people born, say, in the 90s and onwards, they are supposedly 73% more likely to want recognition at least a few times a month compared with baby boomers. Basically, this is all to show that a one size fits all approach just does not work. I know, Goldie, I've spoken about so many different things. I'm curious to hear what's your take on all of this.
I'm feeling very feisty today. The first thing I'm going to say is, does this millennial know and identify what his or her leadership style is? I think that starts kind of putting the layers on everything from the get-go. If the millennial is aware and confident and in alignment with their inner leader, that in itself begins to inspire those in front of them. You mentioned something. Boomers stay loyal and you will be rewarded. Gen Z believe if there's no purpose, I'm not staying. If you read those two statements from a neutral perspective, they sound exactly the same. It's just a different choice of words, isn't it? So what does the millennial leader, or let's say manager, have to do here? Understand the translated version of each cohort and show up in that manner. So yes, you're right. One size does not fit the entire approach on the same people. But what if we stopped seeing people for the cohorts they belong to, which automatically gives you this feeling that, oh, you're a certain type of person, and just see them for the person they are? Because I would like to argue that not every single Gen Z operates with this, I will only work for purpose. And I don't think every single boomer truly believes, stay loyal to me and I'll be here forever. So that's the first thing that's coming up for me. The millennial needs to understand their own leadership style and work in the way that inspires those who he's leading, you know. And the second thing that's coming up is expectations. Are we aligned with the same expectations for each other on teams? Isn't that one of the most basic things that you do when you're leading people? Help them understand, what are you expecting of them? So my expectation of you having to resign does not come from sending me a Slack message. There's a way and there's a form and there's a system that we run by in this organization or company, where communication is set in a manner where it's through a letter, through a one-on-one phone call, or let's just have a conversation. I'm curious to ask, why was this done on Slack? So what was the motivation? Was it such an informal organization that they felt it was okay to just resign on Slack? So I'm being very feisty and playing devil's advocate today, because I really truly believe that there are too many labels out there that need to be shattered. And there's a ceiling that one is not able to come out of. There are too many bubbles here, and we need to kind of break these bubbles down when it comes to leadership. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you covered like all the points that are going to show up in the second segment of this episode. So I heard you speak quite a bit about what is your own unique leadership style. I heard you speak about, when boomers say one thing versus when Gen Z say something, it's essentially the same thing when you look at it, you zoom out and look at it, right? Both of them really want to feel valued and show that they are of value, and to feel like they are they belong, and there's a place for them to contribute. And those are some of the things that will come up in the second segment, including another thing you mentioned about looking at them as individuals and not as an entire cohort. So we're moving on to segment two now, which is how are this cohort of leaders, millennials, going to adapt and find their own unique way forward. So now we laid out the struggles of being a millennial leader, managing both Gen Z and boomers. Now let's talk about what they can actually do right now. Now, at the end of the day, there is only one way to move forward, and that is to adapt. In fact, it's not just how you will make this work, it's how any generation or any individual thrives in a changing world. With Gen Z, you'll have to understand that all they really want is to feel valued and their work to feel meaningful. Having an open conversation on what are their individual expectations, what is their communication preference, what are their work preferences, and all these other things will go a really long way in making them feel heard and understood. And once you do that, you can always tell them what is workable and what isn't, and ask them how they'd like to find a solution together. In general, Gen Z is a very, very collaborative generation, and they will jump on any opportunity to find middle ground and a shared solution. Oh, of course, it's a lot more work to do initially to be able to speak to every single member of every single cohort of this cohort or every other cohort even. But once you get an idea of what it is that they want and what these expectations are and what can and cannot work, once it's done, it's done, and they will hold themselves accountable to everything they agreed on simply because it was their decision too. Now with boomers, it's a slightly different approach. I'm fairly certain that no one actually wants to torture their employees and make them work long hours for the sake of it. And they're not asking people to come to the office every day for no reason, also. Boomers care most about two things. One is results, and second one is respect. Respect for their work and respect for their experience. Now, it's not like it's in this particular order. It's these are two very, very important things for them. So when boomers see employees working late hours and coming to the office daily, to them they see their people bringing in results. With them, it's show don't tell. Now, if you can show them how working fewer hours and working remotely can bring the same kind of results or even better results, you will 100% have their buy-in, because, mind you, this generation has seen way more change and lived through way more change and adapted way more than any of the other generations have, because they've lived through your time and a lot more. Now, Goldie, I know there are some ideas that you have as well on all of this. I'd love to hear what you like to add to this.
I think everything you've said is wonderful, and having an understanding of the needs of each generation is definitely a good place to start. But if HR is going to take care of all these employees, which is where I want to start with, I think it's really important to recognize the core needs that every single cohort has, which is belonging and respect. I mean, we said that boomers value respect. Obviously, they value respect, but in a very roundabout way, Gen Z also value respect and being respected. In fact, they're thriving for it because they've just entered the workplace, and more than often, behind their insecurities and quirky ways, all they're trying to really do is fit in and find a place for themselves. So what I'm saying is these solutions that we're putting forward will work if there is a genuine understanding that actually everyone wants these two core things, which is to feel belonged and to be respected and respect the other, right? And that's where connection occurs. And this is the sort of core, let's say, at the heart of leadership. You just want to connect with the other person, and then you'll do and work together and collaborate in a way that benefits everyone. So performance should also be another thing that should be considered. I feel it's really important to see the person for their performance and not how they get there sometimes. So people often get judged for the person they are rather than for their process or their performance of what the result they bring. Yeah. And that's essentially how boomers and Gen Z probably knock horns, right? If a Gen Z wants to work from home but will deliver the same results, but the boomer feels that's not quite the way to bring in those results, it's arguable. And then, of course, I have some other ideas, which, these are just, again, my wild side comes out. What about if we had a day when everybody could just come dressed casual to work? And inculcate that, say, on Fridays. So what happens there is you're bringing everybody on the same level just by their physical appearance. And we know how much what you wear and how you look marks you in the image of the other person, the impression you set. So if a boomer is seen in his casual chinos and I don't know, denim shirt the way I'm wearing today, maybe the Gen Z will feel more drawn into speaking to this person who from the offset may just be showing up in suits every day, which is not what they want to, I think that's just a little layer that could facilitate the connection. But the bottom line is about understanding that everybody really wants the same thing. The other thing that I strongly promote is cross mentoring, which I think is something we've spoken about in the past. So, have the opportunity the way we used to have at school. You could be a teacher for the day. Really get to see what it's like to have the burden of being a teacher. It's not all glory from the outside, but when you're in the role, it's pretty hard stuff, right? So these are sort of little initiatives that perhaps the smaller organizations could do as a test trial to bring the workers more together, and that really does promote more diversity and inclusion at the end of the day.
Yeah. So essentially, it's like two things that are coming up for me very strongly. One is understanding that at the end of the day, everybody just wants the same thing, and that's one of the reasons that we even started this podcast, because we recognize that everybody wants the same thing, and we just want to bring awareness to it and help them bridge the gap on how they can go about getting this shared thing, right? And the second one is about how can we allow another person be to feel more comfortable connecting with us beyond just what they see, because when that barrier kind of goes away and you realize that, oh, okay, this person is actually just another human being and not not like a title. That connection happens, and when there is that connection, it's a lot harder to say torture employees. Let's say, right? That's the those are the two things that are coming up for me very very strongly from what we shared, Goldie.
Yeah. I just want to add one more thing, which I think is always a struggle, especially for it doesn't matter what cohort you belong to, but it's more about how comfortable do I feel giving assertive feedback on a situation which I'm struggling to either manage or deliver on or even agree upon. So it's not the easiest thing to tell your boomer manager or boss, hey, I don't quite understand why we have to do things in this way when I have a proposal that goes in the same direction, but my methodology varies to yours. Or even for a boomer to tell a Gen Z, I agree that you want to be flexible, but there are certain base rules that need to be abided so that we can deliver with the image and the vision that the company has always believed in. So those conversations need to be had more frequently with a sense of a safe space that you can promote between the cohorts. Yeah.
Yeah, and that takes us towards the conclusion of this episode as well, which is to say that while this episode was very much influenced and inspired by a LinkedIn post, this is a very, very common experience for not just millennial leaders, but for any leader from any generation. And the only way to overcome this is by one, learning to adapt, and two, being able to create opportunities for open conversations to happen and adapting not to the generation but to the individuals and to the times that we live in today, because that's when you actually mind the gen gap. Oh, you know how else you can mind the gen gap? By sharing this episode with people who you feel need to hear this. Like I said, it's not always easy to open up conversations about these topics, and sharing this episode will help you start that conversation. And with that, we come to the end of episode 27 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast. I've been your host, Lakshan.
And I've been your co-host, Goldie.
Thank you so much for listening, watching, and tuning in all the way to the very end.
Muchísimas gracias.
See you in the next one.
Hasta pronto.
Bye.